Hello and welcome to Unleashed. I'm your host, Will Bachman. Today's episode is a recording of a panel discussion that we had for the Umbrex community on the topic of becoming an adjunct professor, the pros and cons, and how to do it. We cover the following questions in this panel discussion. What motivated these consultants to teach a course as an adjunct professor? How do you get hired as an adjunct professor? Should you aim to teach in a traditional MBA program, an executive MBA program, or some other type of certificate or degree program? How much work is it really? And the answer is much more than I had expected. How much do you typically get paid? What sort of relationship building opportunities does the role provide? Has these teaching roles ever led to project opportunities in their consulting practice? And what other ancillary benefits exist, such as access to datasets or research services? I'm grateful for the panelists who participated in this: Adam Braff, Mary Kate Scott, Jared Lee, Leila Gedso Karazmi, Mohanad Goma, Nicholas Zeisler, who you'll hear me refer to as Z, and Sven Biker. And now for the panel discussion. Why be an adjunct in terms of what are the benefits? And let's be transparent. You're like, how much do you get paid? And a whole series of questions. So if you have questions, pop them in the chat so I can integrate those. All right, let's start with Adam and Mary Kate. So maybe you could just say what you teach and where, and then go into the reasons that you decided to do it. So let's start with that, and let's turn to Adam, and then we'll turn to Mary Kate.
I'll just do the briefest introduction first. So I'm Adam Braff. I am a data and analytics kind of executive / advisor. I've been doing that for a few decades now. And I teach, not surprisingly, topics related to business analytics at Brown and at NYU. So that's me in a nutshell. And it's something I do on the side very much as a almost like a hobby alongside my consulting work.
Okay. And why did you decide to teach, Adam? What's the benefit? I mean, you're very busy as a consultant. You could be playing with your dog and running your prediction contest. Why teach?
Sure. Okay. So the top line, I wasn't sure if we were going to do all the intros first. So the top line is, I think the best reasons to teach are not the practical instrumental ones, but more the passion ones, and the fact that you love teaching and you're almost compelled to do it. You feel drawn to it. And we can certainly get into all of the practical reasons as well. But honestly, I teach because it's a creative act along the lines of a prediction contest and writing a stupid blog with pictures of my dog. So I'll just say it's more of a kind of a kooky spiritual thing for me than like a way to make an extra, 10 grand.
All right. Mary Kate, how about yourself? What do you teach and where, and what's the main drivers that got you to raise your hand to teach?
Sure. So, hi, everyone. So I'm Mary Kate Scott, and I teach at the University of Southern California, and I teach in the Marshall School of Business in the MBA program and the Keck School of Medicine. And my focus is around healthcare. So I've taught the business of healthcare, innovation in healthcare, new business models in healthcare, entrepreneurship in healthcare. I did a deep dive on medical device business models. And the Keck School of Medicine is teaching physicians about the business of healthcare. So either MBA students or I teach physicians. So my brief bio, so I started at Procter & Gamble, and then I went back, got a lot more school, became a professor and loved it, and actually went to McKinsey and said, I'm really only joining McKinsey for 2 years so I can become a better professor. And that was... And they said, oh, that's okay. It turned out I actually really loved it and stayed at McKinsey for 7 years. And for me, like Adam, you do this for the joy of doing it. And there's a lot more benefits than just joy. But it's really like I come home from teaching and I'm like dancing around in my kitchen because it's just so much fun. And it's fun because at the level we teach, people are super engaged. They want to be in class. They have read, and it's just a lot of fun. So do you want to start going through questions or more here, Will? What would you like?
No, thank you for asking. I'll have a couple of other people introduce themselves, and then we'll go on to the next question. Okay. So far we have 2 for passion and 0 for everything else in terms of the scorekeeping. Sven Biker, why don't you tell us where you teach and what was like the main drivers that got you to say, oh, I want an opportunity to teach, so
Sure.
maybe I'll volunteer my time.
Happy to. Well, good morning, everyone from Palo Alto, California. I teach strategy making at the Stanford Business School, also in the MBA program. And also recently, I got another teaching appointment at a university in Sweden, Borås, and that's about AI and product development. So that's fairly recent. Maybe let me tell you a little bit more about the Stanford teaching. And it was basically a carryover from my time when I was full-time at Stanford as an manager in automotive programs. And I took that over during my time at McKinsey, which is now 10 years ago. I've been an independent for about 7 years now. And I took it over because I found it, in addition to what others said already, that it's that you enjoy it, also really stimulating to work together with younger people. They challenge you in a different way than actually the young MBAs that you might meet at McKinsey or so in the team room. The intellectual stimulation was really good. And I will say it's now also some kind of branding. I mean, I still have a Stanford email address. When I get a request like, hey, Sven, can you give a keynote? I say, well, sure, you can get me as a keynote speaker from Stanford Business School or as my independent consulting practice, Silicon Valley Mobility. So branding is also a pretty good thing, I will admit.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sven. And Mohanad, tell us about where you teach, U.S. Navy Postgraduate School. Awesome. And what drew you to that? What drew you to it? What motivated you?
Yeah, I mean it's been very interesting actually. What motivated me to do it was actually a contract that I won with another colleague, and he asked if I would be interested in doing it. Part of it was actually due to the subject matter expertise that I had. So it was very interesting to sort of design the curriculum and then deliver it, which was very fulfilling in a lot of ways. And that took me actually internationally as well. So it was very exciting. I got to teach in a couple of countries. And that contract at some point ended. So was the program is still there, but I haven't pursued it. But that got me, I mean, what got me there is actually my passion for teaching as well. So during my tenure at Accenture Strategy, I used to teach in consulting colleges for managers and consultants. The typical thing, how to build a business case and so forth, and how to sell. So it was very fulfilling to give back to as a mentor to my colleagues. But then, and I mean, you go to a lot of projects and you have to set up those workshops. So I think it's inherited in us as consultants to do that as part of the job. And then lately, which is really just happened a week ago, I got authorized by the Association of Supply Chain Management to be a trainer to teach supply chain certifications. I don't know if there's any supply chain practitioners here, but I'll be teaching the CSCP, Certified Supply Chain Professional certification, as well as others as well. And my goal from this was to associate myself with a reputable knowledge body that would help me, like Sven said, part of branding, to sort of give me the opportunity to meet with different stakeholders that might be interested in then a follow-up, whether it's an assessment or helping them with a roadmap and find opportunities there. So I also just signed an agreement to be a consulting partner for the ASCM. So that was the lead way. And what I was really looking forward to is to develop that relationship with that body so that it would take me to explore more opportunities and across industries. So I'm very excited about it. Teaching is definitely something that is a passion, like you all said, and it can definitely be revenue generating beyond the passion for sure.
All right. So I think we have 3 for passion and 3.5 for passion and 1 for sort of prestige, impact, kind of reputational aura kind of benefits. I want to turn to Layla, who teaches applied consulting course at University of Copenhagen. Layla, what drew you to consulting? I mean, to being a professor, to being an adjunct.
Yes.
Layla.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes. Very briefly, I've done it for 5 years now, and I basically just find it really fun, and it gives me lots of energy, like I heard several of you say. It's definitely not for the pay. It doesn't pay very well. I would say you can't live from doing that kind of work. But it also, as I heard some of you said, establishes me a little bit like an expert. It's a small country here. We're only 5 million people, and Copenhagen is small. So having a role like that, people will sort of get to know my name a little bit. And I've already seen that it also gives some clients. So it's not bad business-wise, I would say. But I would, if I didn't find it fun and energizing to be together with these young people, I definitely wouldn't do it. And I guess the last thing I want to mention is also the whole sort of applied economic consulting. So I'm teaching them to act as a consultant and do a consulting style report. And that's very satisfying because the economics degree here is very theoretical, very mathematical. So I think they really need to get some inspiration from the outside world, apart from what the typical professor will teach them.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's my...
I think we're running now at 4.5 for passion and loving to do it, just getting energy out of it. Awesome. And Zia, I haven't forgotten you. There's a number of questions in the chat, and this was something that we wanted to cover of how do you actually get the gig? So who do you reach out to? Are these like posted somewhere, or is this more through personal network? You reach out to the dean or something. Hey, I'd be happy to teach a course. And I'd like to start, Adam, with you. You and I talked about this a little bit, that maybe you don't start by saying going for the full-time MBA kind of flagship program, but you might start with more of some kind of EMBA or certificate or something. Adam, how did you get into this? How does one actually get, started as an adjunct professor?
So if we begin with the assumption that what you're trying to do is just get into teaching the subject that you know about and that you're excited about, you're probably going to be better off to be somewhat flexible about the institution in which you're doing that, right? You have a hypothesis probably that you want to be in higher ed. Maybe most of the people on this call are sort of guided a little bit toward business school programs. I have found that it's very hard for you to find at once the perfect combination of the geography you're in, the prestige of an institution that is going to give you that kind of, reflected glory, that is, they have a need for the exact role that you're teaching, and it's the degree program. So you have to flex on some of these dimensions. And very often the easiest one to flex on is the one you were hinting at, Will, which is there are probably a lot of schools around the city you're in. I don't know about Copenhagen, but there are lots of schools around there, and there are often kind of like flanker brands where they have executive MBA programs and masters of leadership programs and other programs where they're trying to build them up and they're trying to grow them, and they actually have a need for people who either teach your specific subject matter area, or there's just an opening in the curriculum in general and you have the opportunity to pitch a syllabus. So short answer is you would cast a broad net, fixating only on the dimensions that are absolutely necessary to you. And then we can talk a little bit about how to network your way over to the right people in those institutions.
Okay, we'll just say about that. So let's say, I want to teach somewhere in New York City because it's where I live. And I'm, maybe something about consulting or something that I know. But what do you just walk in, reach out to HR, email the dean, call as a former professor? How do you do it?
I think for the people here who are experienced industry professionals and who are good at networking over to, the right part of an org, the part that you're aiming for is the academic director of different degree programs. So you can just search out the name of that person, but there's someone in charge of the kind of the substantive side of what these degree programs is. And if you can find who that person is, then you're just kind of going through your 2 degrees of separation to find that person and have a chat. it's all informational interviewing from there. So I would say try to find the academic director.
All right, fantastic. Any of other of our panelists? Mary Kate, go ahead.
Yeah. Sometimes they're be called academic director, program director, or sometimes they're just like a lead professor of something you teach. And so I think how I got started was being a guest speaker. And it's a really easy way to get started. And I want you to think about Adjunct on a continuum. So you could be just a guest speaker and show up occasionally. Then further on the continuum, someone could say, could you deliver a class? And it might be a shorter class, or it might be some of an elective class. And as you go further down, you might actually be able to create the curriculum and deliver it. So there's kind of a range of opportunities. And first of all, I'll agree, I do it for the joy. There are a lot of benefits in doing this. So publications, networking. I actually have one of my former students is now head of a particular, LA County Department of Health. So the network that you get out of it, I do agree with Sven, the credibility. So it's certainly more, you get more out of it, but that's what got me into it. But I would definitely reach out to people who are teaching courses somewhat similar to what you could teach to get started.
Okay, thank you. So that was an idea. Just you don't have to start by teaching the whole course, but start as a guest lecturer, get to know the university a little bit, and maybe. And this kind of gets into a later question, but you also said it seems like because we had a lot of questions around how do you create the curriculum. It sounds like some courses they may have a curriculum off the shelf that you don't have to create the whole thing from scratch. You can take a curriculum they already have and just deliver it.
The other thing is, this is going to sound obvious, but let people know you're interested. So I was a guest speaker and I had someone say, I'd love to set up a meeting with you. Can you help me find adjuncts? And I was like, sure, I can. What are you looking for? And finally he said, well, I know you'd never do it. We can't pay you enough, but could you help us find people? And that's when I said, you know what? I just would love to do it. And so letting people know that this is something of interest. It's a funny thing that many people expect to be invited. So put yourself out there.
Thank you. Sven.
I definitely want to second what Mary Kate just said. And I find it surprising how many full-time professors don't like to teach. So I'm very often getting these conversations in the hallway. How many classes do you have this quarter? Oh, I have 3 classes and I hope it will be over soon. So that's, I think, important to understand for those who are interested in some teaching. Very often the full-time professors are actually looking for someone else to at least come in for guest lecture, what Mary Kate just said. And that's really the foot in the door, that they know actually that you can teach, that you can interact with the class, because you can be a great consultant, you can create great presentations, but it doesn't make you a good educator. But once they see that you teach well and that you interact with the class and it's meaningful, they might say, well, what if we teach a class together? And then at some point, we have a gap in our teaching curriculum. Are you interested in that? So that is really something not to underestimate, that they are basically constantly looking for someone to bring a real world experience into the classroom. The other thing maybe to consider is as well, there's at Stanford, and I'm sure at other universities as well, a lot of continuing education programs, so more the professional side of education. And that is separate from the undergraduate or graduate programs, but it still gets you the satisfaction of teaching something, passing on your knowledge, gets you a title at the university if that's of meaning to people. And from there, it could also develop, you're doing the continuing education program, so maybe you're interested in the graduate program as well. So it's really a lot about networking. And one thing that comes to my mind with this is I forgot the name, but whoever talked about board memberships at one of the Umbrex meetings the other day, he said, well, if you want to go on a board, and that's like you want to become a member of a country club and you walk through the front door and ask, where's the application? That basically means you don't know how it works. So that's very similar here. You network your way in, basically.
So we talked a little bit about how you might express your interest to the academic director. what is the typical evaluation process? So, one question we had from Rosie was, do you need specific teaching credentials or certificates, or how do they evaluate you? Do they typically ask you to go and guest teach one lecture so someone can evaluate you? Like, what's the sort of interview/evaluation process look like? And either Adam, Mary Kate, or Sven, or one of the other panelists, just raise your hand if who would like to start answering that one. Leila, I'll call on you. So what was the evaluation process?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I guess I was quite surprised actually that there was no process. But in both the cases, I forgot to mention, I'm also at the Copenhagen Business School running something for the MBA students. And in both cases, it was a close friend, colleague, previous colleague of mine who recommended me. So they took care of actually getting me on board, and I felt that was quite important. So it's a bit related to your last question as well. So I think having somebody internally who can vouch for you can make a great difference. And then they will know the procedures and who to talk to and ask. And then they pretty much just let me go in front of the students without any further ado. No help, no just examination.
Throw those people in front of the students. All right, Adam, how did it work for you? Was there a test run or?
Yeah, similar to what Leila said for the first gig, which is, they take it on faith because someone knows you and they know that you're going to do a good job. After you've done the first thing and you've taught something, then you have a track record. You may have a recording of a video of your lecture. You'll probably have a syllabus that you've written, and you'll have student evaluations. So there's enough proof that when you take it to the next institution, they'll feel reasonably confident that they haven't screwed up by letting you teach a class.
All right. And how about you, Sven?
Yeah, so with the two universities, it was somewhat different. So at Stanford, it was that I was already a full-time employee at Stanford and taught already in engineering, and then I was asked at the business school. So there was basically the trail of reference, I guess. But Stanford then also has a pretty rigorous evaluation system from the students. So if at the end of the quarter it shows that you are really below average, then they will have a conversation with you. So in the beginning, you might say they might take a leap of faith, that they say, well, he's taught elsewhere, so let's give it a shot. At the Swedish university, I would say it was more rigorous, that they really wanted to get from me PhD certificates and teaching credentials and even some publications, I think. So they were definitely weighing it more in an academic way, like, okay, checks all the boxes or not. So it really depends, I guess, on the university.
Fantastic. Okay, we've had several questions around, this is all nice, but like, what roughly is the compensation that we're talking about, and how much time commitment does this take? So, this would be like a nice hobby, a passion project, but, people want to know what they're getting into. So maybe we won't ask you for your specific compensation, but, if you could give us just a rough general idea, perhaps of what these typically pay to teach a course, and maybe give us a sense of what kind of time commitment it typically looks like. So anyone willing to volunteer of our panelists here?
Yeah, I'll throw out some numbers. So it changes over time, but I would say the range that I've seen is anywhere between like $6,000 for a class for a semester to $15,000. And the time commitment, so let's say the median is 10, the time commitment for creating a syllabus from scratch, if you really care about what you're doing, is like 200 hours, right? So you're getting $50 an hour basically for your work. Like you're managing a retail store the first time you teach it. Now, subsequent times you're teaching, it's much less work. It might be 50 hours or the amount of time you spend, teaching. So just for round numbers, like those are the kinds of numbers I've seen. There's a little special case, which is that you might also get some benefits associated with the teaching, as in healthcare benefits, which are subsidized. So there is extra value there. But I'll throw out those numbers and see if people react.
Okay. Mary Kate?
So pretty similar numbers. When I started a long time ago, it was roughly $1,000 for a class, which was 90 minutes. More recently, pre-pandemic, it's about $2,000 for a 2-hour class. And you either do a 7-week, a 12-week, or a 14-week program. And at first it might sound like a lot. It's not. Okay. And if you a 2-hour class takes you quite a long time to prepare. So it really does come down to something like $100 an hour. Maybe it's 50, it depends. So the very first time you do it, right? And again, remember my guest speaker, you take over, you co-teach, you take over someone's curriculum, you develop. If you're actually starting with a blank sheet of paper because they've asked you to create curriculum, including create the assessment, create projects. So you can't live on this. So somewhere I think I earned like 12 to 15, 12, 14, 18,000, never that much. The other thing you might want to think about is how this fits in. And if this is off topic, will stop me, how it fits into your consulting. So if you're committing to a class every single week, that can limit your consulting business if you travel a lot for consulting business. So the other way you can do this, so like the physicians, they actually did a week intense in person. For me, that was actually better because of the scheduling, right? So you might want to think about what are you committing to, and then the money, and then what's the output. I'll just add briefly to the other question, like the evaluation process. It's surprisingly minimal, but they often will look at your publication, your guest speaker. So just that evaluation is really minimal, but ways you can offer is, hey, here's a white paper I've written, a publication, here's my presentation as a guest speaker, and all those things go. But the big evaluation, someone's probably going to listen into one class, and the student evaluation is critical.
Okay. Thank you. Z, we haven't heard from you. Did you want to weigh in on just sort of like compensation and time commitment?
Yeah, I was kind of just dropping some things in the chat. Well, I'm a professor of practice at Michigan State University's Broad School of Business in the Master of Science degree in customer experience management, and it was a brand new program, inaugural. So I was paid extra the first year because I had to build the course and create it, and so there was extra compensation involved in that. And then it's a semester cycle and then plus a summer semester. And so when a new cohort kicks off, it kind of flows, year by year as far as that is. And so with the rest of the faculty, I'm paid now at this point just for the times that I do it, but it's done on an annual basis. So I don't know what the other folks' experience is, but it's a salaried position, but it's like a proportion of a salary where, it's not like a full-time gig. So, for quite some time, I was paid for not doing anything until I started building the course and then started teaching. And then for months at a time, I'm still getting a check from MSU, because they spread it out over the full year. Yeah, I don't know if it's more like, hey, here's a check for teaching this term or something like that for the other panelists. But it like I said, it's based. I'm getting a W-2 and a salary type of a thing. It's just tremendously small.
Next topic is, we had this question in the chat, and it was one that was on my mind as well, which was certainly awesome to get the joy out of it and and just sort of the inspiration. It's one benefit that we've heard, and you feel compelled, like you have to do it. In addition to that benefit, have any of you either gotten consulting project leads that resulted in something from your teaching somehow, or have you found that it helps you convert leads into confirmed projects because of the credibility? Like, well, I teach at, Brown, this very topic. So in terms of the sort of carryover, spillover benefits to your consulting practice, would love to hear any of you, your experience. Mary Kate, would you like to start?
Sure. Okay. So I have got clients from it. So sometimes people will reach out to other professors and say, can you do some consulting? And they'll say no and refer them to me. So I have got projects from this. I have got clients. My students have become my clients, which is fun. I've got team members as well. So the network, it is a tremendous benefit. And the credibility, I think, is. I've got some publications that I've written myself or co-written with other professors. So I think it does translate to business.
All right. Adam. Thank you, Mary Kate.
Yeah, I think the second part of what Mary Kate was saying, I agree with, which is that there's some indirect ways in which the teaching is going to play out and be synergistic with your consulting work. For me, it's more synergistic with the writing that I do, and then the writing is what causes people to reach out to me, writing in my blog. There is one direct way in which the teaching has led to gigs, which is I've adapted my classes that I teach at these schools to a corporate version of the training, which does pay normal rates. And so I've been teaching that corporate version of this, which I wouldn't have done if I hadn't started by teaching an academic version of it.
Okay. So that might be something to keep in mind, to really focus on the language of the contract to make sure that you have the right to port your IP to a corporate context. So because some universities might not permit that unless you had negotiated it. Sven, what about you? Have you seen any kind of project leads come in?
Yeah, definitely. So project leads that, as Mary-Kate also said, maybe former students then become clients, or their organizations reach out to me because they say, "Oh, I know this professor at the university, and he's also doing consulting." So it definitely nurtures your network. Absolutely. One thing that happens here relatively often, actually, in Silicon Valley, that the students, when they graduate, then they want to do their startup, and they ask me for an advisory role on their startup. So I end up as on the advisory board relatively often. And the other piece, Will, that you asked, if maybe a client or prospective client who reaches out, and does it make a difference then that I am a professor? And yes, it does. That the clients then say, "Oh, he's good. He's a consultant. He was at McKinsey, and he did this and this and this, and he also lectures at the Stanford Business School." So it definitely gives you, I don't know, more standing, more credibility, and sometimes even my clients like to brag about it, like, "Oh, we have this consultant. He also teaches at Stanford." So I see a lot of pluses there. Yes.
So you mentioned several of the benefits around just the networking and so forth. What are some ways to make sure you're taking advantage of that? Like, are there opportunities to connect with other faculty members? Do faculty hang out together, or do funders of the university ever meet with the faculty? Like, behind the scenes, what are some ways that if someone does go into this, some best practices you picked up over the years of, making the full opportunity to build relationships? Nick, I'll go with you. Z.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Will. If you are part of the faculty of a program and you're adjunct like this, you are not going to be alone. And there are going to be people who are doing exactly what you're doing. And if you're not leveraging those, I mean, well, that's an absolute no-brainer. And I have been able to partner with some of my fellow professors of practice, absolutely. And in fact, given that they're in the program, given that they're teaching, they're probably pretty doubled up on things, and they're going to need some help as far as augmenting their own work with their own clients. So 100%. That is another great benefit of it.
Okay, thank you. Mary-Kate, any tips on this?
Yeah, so the first semester I taught, I literally went in to the university and left. And I realized at the end of it all, what a wasted opportunity. And so the second time I actually said, "Hey, is there a faculty meeting I can come to? I'd love to understand more about this. Is there a faculty this?" So it can be very easy not to get the networking benefits. Equally so, ask for where they meet. And it was funny because a lot of the permanent faculty were sort of like, "Oh, we'd love to have you. We thought it was too much to ask." So really put yourself out there and take advantage and make it happen.
Anyone else on this topic? Any other panelists?
Yeah, I mean, on the networking, I was thinking, my immediate reaction was, it's not that much. But then listening to our colleagues here, I realized, no, there actually is a lot. But it is in at least two layers, I would say. There's one layer which is on the adjunct layer, where you are a peer. And the other layer is like the full faculty, or the tenure track faculty. And there I do experience it's a little bit of like, oh, he's one of the adjunct people. So that's maybe just something to keep in mind. But the other piece really, I mean, the university is your oyster. I mean, make it your network. And what I also appreciate about this is that you are part of an organization. I mean, for better or worse, there's some negatives to this as well. But also, let's say, through the pandemic, that you have your briefings there and you get updated on what's going on here. other things like all the conflicts that you have right now. So things that you would normally get from your employer. I mean, it is your employer, and it's up to you whether you want to go to the faculty meetings, many of those online anyways. So you get your, let's say, corporate fix from that as well, which I do appreciate because it's not as mandatory as if I was like a full-time employee, but it's really a great resource for me to stay on top of things.
Tell us a little bit about what it actually takes to develop a curriculum. So Adam, when you said it takes 200 hours, it blew me away. My mental model was, I don't know, sit down for a Saturday afternoon and write week by week or something, right? So what, 200 hours, what is involved in building a curriculum?
Yeah, I think as lay people, we tend to use the words curriculum and syllabus interchangeably. But what I'm talking about is a syllabus for a particular course, right? Which is to say, the series of topics you're going to teach as the lectures across a 14-week semester, the actual PowerPoint slides to teach that, the quizzes that you're going to test people on, the readings that you're selecting, the final project, like all of the stuff that you have to pack in to teach a class that's going to be really good. That is the syllabus is meant to be the kind of the term that encompasses all of that stuff. And so when you're putting it together the first time, it's a lot of work to do that, because like you underestimate things that are that seem like they'd be easy. Like, how would you create evaluation materials, quizzes that you can actually evaluate people in an objective way, so they're not going to be fighting you about their grade, but it's also substantive and hard enough, but it's not going to be so hard that people are going to get really low grades? And what's the tension between the grades you give them relative to the evaluation? Like, there's so much going on. That's a lot of work, and that gets a lot easier after the first time you do it.
And it really depends what kind of class it is, right? I mean, for instance, at Stanford, I got this seminar class where it's really a lot about the discussion with the students, and I bring in guest lecturers, so it's actually quite time consuming to get the guest lecturers and to have them all scheduled, and then of course there are last minute changes. Sorry, I can't make it. Can I come next week instead of this week, and something like that. So there's an administrative part to it, whereas for this class, actually the content creation is not that much. I got an offer like a couple of years ago to develop a brand new class on automotive engineering at State University here. I really, really wanted to do this because in the end, I'm an engineer by heart. And I really wanted to do this, but it was just too much work to prepare this. And I said, sorry, people, if you have some existing material that I can start with, then I would really like to do this. They said, no, the teaching material really belongs to the previous teachers, so you have to start from scratch. And that, like a real, where you really, really teach all the details. And especially then, I think they wanted to do exams like 3 times throughout the semester. I said, that's really too much. So it really depends. A seminar class is relatively straightforward. But a full teaching with all the details, that really needs to be thought about.
Okay, I want to call in a new panelist. Jared Lee has been teaching at McGill University. So Jared, maybe you could add to some of what we've been hearing, particularly around, you had a comment that you sent me direct chat. It's sort of almost a cliche, but it's true in fact, right? How when you teach something, it really forces you to learn it in a much deeper way. Could you talk a little bit about how you've experienced that?
Thanks very much, Will. Yeah, so I teach as a faculty lecturer at McGill University at the Datasets Faculty of Management. I've been a principal at Juniper, which is a consultancy based here in Montreal for the past 5 years. And Will, to your point, if you really think you know something, just wait until you have to teach it and to explain it to others and to defend the theory against questions. It's one thing to stand up in front of clients or to guide clients through a process. And we've all had that experience as consultants of thinking on our feet. But if you've got 180 students who are the best and the brightest that your university has admitted, wanting to ask detailed questions, and you haven't pre-gamed the project, you're not sort of in control of the next steps, so to speak, and it's a wide open opportunity for learning and reflection, you'll get a lot of questions that demand you to defend what you think in terms of theory, but also to bring to bear practice. And there's a lot of times that in order to prepare for that, you have to really be quite bulletproof in your own preparation, in your own thought process, in your own storytelling of the material or whatever it is. So it's really helped me to learn deeply the theory, the frameworks, the tools, and then be able to port that over to my projects where I can lead clients through that as if it were the classroom sometimes, and have the confidence and the credibility to do so.
Thank you, Jared. On that topic that you raised, in terms of skill building, curious, any of the other panelists, do you feel that being an adjunct professor has built your ability in any ways, like public speaking or other sorts of aspects where, as consultants occasionally will facilitate some session, but, this gives you maybe more public speaking experience, more managing a crowd. Talk to me about any skills that you feel that you've developed from this.
I'd sign on to the idea that it helps with public speaking. Anything that makes you speak clearly to a very diverse audience, I think is helpful. The repetitions help, and you end up looking at the transcript or maybe watching some recordings of how you spoke and realize all the dumb things you're doing wrong. So I think it's helpful for public speaking.
I would definitely second that. So sure, I mean, being in front of a class and you don't know what questions you get. And also, I mean, at a university like Stanford can be pretty demanding. You constantly think, oh man, these people pay a lot to be in my class, so I better give them something good. So yes, that definitely helps with this. And also I would say facilitation, because my class is the seminar style. It's really to keep a good discussion going, but lead it to a goal and make it meaningful. That the students leave in the end and said, oh, we brought in our own ideas. We got good input from the professor. It was well prepared with reading materials. And now I learned this and I have a much better understanding. So to really facilitate this discussion that there's meaning in the end, that definitely helps me now with clients as well. And related to what I said earlier, that the clients then say, oh, can you not set up like one strategy seminar for us, the thing that you do at Stanford? And then I said, well, sure, I can do a strategy seminar for a client, which probably I wouldn't be able to do if I wasn't teaching this already. So it helps a lot, yeah.
I'm curious about sort of additional ancillary benefits that maybe seem small, but might be nice, like access to data sets or access to, academic journal articles or access to other cool stuff I'm not even thinking about. Are there any sort of side benefits like that people might want to be? Nick?
Oh, absolutely. I was actually, somebody else earlier was talking about this and it piqued me. There's all sorts of resources available in academia that you have no idea. And they're all free because it's academia and you're part of the faculty. For example, I live in Denver and I have had books shipped from the MSU library free of charge out here, read them, and then send them back. Access to online journals. I mean, anything all I can just say is library. Talk to the librarian, and they have got so much stuff, and it's completely free. You use it in your private practice, and you can also, you say, well, I'm thinking about this for the class, and then obviously like doing research for a client, perhaps. I mean, obviously don't skate that line, but there's so much. Academic institutions have so much access to so much research and so many publications that is a completely unsung benefit of this more than anything else, I think.
All right. Thank you, Z. Adam, turn to you. And go ahead.
Just answering the same question, there's direct and indirect benefits. I totally agree with that. And the part of the library that's relevant to me is the databases, right? The ability to get access to, online, like licensed, like expensive data sets and terminals. That's good. There are also just leverage. I think Sven sort of alluded to this, but your .edu email address is going to open up other kinds of doors, yes. Right? When you're wearing your academic garb, so to speak, and you're trying to have conversations with people for any reason, even if you're like 3 links away from something that's related to a consulting project, if you're genuinely having that conversation for the purpose of building a lecture for your course, and you're not just like cynically, like really trying to get in for a consulting thing, you can often have really good, interesting conversations, which then incidentally will lead to work later. But like, as long as you're being genuine about it, being an academic and saying, hey, I really want to pick your brain on this for a class I'm teaching is going to open up like a million doors for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you, Adam. Jared, how about you?
Yeah, somebody asked in the chat specifically about health insurance. So it's going to depend on the institution. And I think maybe one of our panelists mentioned before, for our institution at McGill, if you teach 3 sections within a given year, then you have access. You're essentially considered a part-time employee. So that's what I do. It's sort of the minimal load. And then I get access to health insurance, but also to supplemental pension and investment plan, which for the Umbrex network, when many of us are small consultancies or individuals, buying health insurance, supplemental health insurance can be quite prohibitive if you're doing it as a single person. So yeah, that could be quite beneficial.
Fantastic. Thank you. Before everyone drops off, we are approaching the top of the hour here, and I'm mindful of that. Before you leave, it would be very appreciated if you could put in the chat what was one takeaway from today, one thing that surprised you that you heard, one thing that got you inspired. Just put one sort of takeaway in there. 200 hours, says Ritz. Yeah, whoa, big time commitment. That's always interesting to know what resonated with people or what was surprising. So thank you for that. As well as if you have any final questions. And Megan, maybe you could test it on your own screen before you share to see if we can use the Streamlive to summarize these things or show them as they're popping up. Oh, look at this. Oh, very nice. So here's the Streamlive going, and your comments are floating down and kind of we're seeing them all stack up.
It's
like Tetris.
It's Tetris.
It's gonna land on my thumb.
I think actually the back end, this activity type is called Tetris. So good call.
So isn't this kind of fun to watch, these kind of things coming in? All right. Thank you, Megan. You can stop sharing.
And remember, on that 200 hours, there was one class that, it took me 200 hours to create. It was really a passion to create it. But sometimes you're just handed something and that can either take more time or can take less. So, you can actually look at something and say, wow, that's just too much, and do it in a really different way. So, and once you've done it the first time, the second time, you still have to update. At least, I'm sure, Adam, in your field, certainly in mine, things change even in, this year, next year. So it does take time to create this whole content. The content is what you're presenting, the projects, the assessment, the pre-work, the readings. Kind of think of it as this package of teaching. But it's not just you kind of show up and talk. And it was funny, someone mentioned, one of our panelists said, even like bringing in guest lectures, you think, oh, that's really going to save me some time. No, it won't. It's great. And you meet some really cool people, but it takes genuine effort. So don't underestimate, but it may not be 200.
And sometimes it takes.
And really on that one, I guess everybody here has seen a university from the inside. So we all know that all classes are different, right? So, and we know from sitting at the other side, some professors spend a lot of effort and creating all the slides and maybe all the equations and come up with a lot of examples. And others are great facilitators. And to Mary Kate's point, even facilitation requires preparation or should be well prepared. But it's not the same as if you're writing like a 120-page textbook or something like this. It might be required. So really find out what you want to do. And if you start with the guest lecturing, then see, well, how much preparation was this? Is it something that I want to do 10 or 12 times in a row?
Okay, so here's the last question for the panelists. So give us like 45 seconds because we have just 9 minutes left. 45 seconds. What's one additional point or tip that maybe I could have asked you about, but I didn't, or that didn't come up in the chat? Something about this experience that you think it's helpful for other people to know. So, Adam, we'll start with you.
Yeah.
Let's go around the horn.
Okay. I think if there is any major life choice that you're going to make, you should probably have like 3 very different reasons for doing it. And so in the case of teaching, it should be, you love it. You think it'll be, accretive to your, current consulting biz. You're pretty sure that down the road, you're going to want to be a full-time teacher. Like that's sufficient, right? But if you just have like one thing or being super instrumental about it, I don't think it's going to work.
Okay. So 3 reasons for the life decisions. Good for marriage, good for all sorts of things, having kids. Okay. Thank you, Adam. All right. Next up, Jared, what is your 45-second kind of final shot?
Yeah, you'll be surprised at how rewarding it can be I agree with Adam, have really good reasons for doing it, but I am consistently overwhelmed with the amount of ideas and the creativity of the students and how rewarding it is to see that journey, the deeper relationships you can build. As my camera turns off, that as people come back and say, oh, the one thing I remembered from my MBA was your course, or this is what I'm doing with the project now. It's incredibly rewarding.
Very nice. Mary Kate.
Yes, I'd say, be really clear why you're doing this, and therefore you will do it well. So if you are doing it to build a network, you will do it a little differently. For me, I think, okay, I meet a lot of really cool people. I built a great skill set on how to structure, for example, structure a class, present and engage. And it's good, something to have fun, feed the soul, get joy.
Thank you, Mary Kate. Sven.
Well, basically everything has already been said, but maybe how about this one? I think I mentioned in the beginning that I started this well before I started at McKinsey. And when I was about to accept the offer from McKinsey, I considered really, really carefully if I can do this while be a consultant at McKinsey and still teach at the university. And for a moment, I thought like, well, maybe I have to drop it. And then thankfully, my wife said, you must be out of your mind that you're giving up a lecturer position at Stanford Business School. She was right. I'm glad that I kept it.
All right. So stick to it. Layla. Thank you, Sven.
One last comment that I didn't hear anyone said. One thing that I really enjoy with the students is that I have to read their papers, which is, of course, a little bit time consuming, but it keeps me updated on the very sort of relevant and actual topics that they are working on and that are in the news. So that's a very, very interesting side benefit. Huh. That was my last.
Thank you, Layla. Z.
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, the second job is easier to get. It helped that I was already an assistant professor at the Air Force Academy in my reserve status. And just having that, like, okay, well, come on in. There was a lot of discussion earlier about like, how did you get hired? And so that helped. Second, I just lean in again to that guest lecturing thing. Speak in someone's class for free. And there's your entree right there. I mean, you have to develop it, that you have to be proactive. You have to ask, you have to probe and so forth. And then finally, I think Layla kind of touched on this, but I'd say steal from your students. And I don't mean that in any literal sense, but these are people who are in the practice. These are people who are learning. These are people who are having experiences. And if you're at an advanced enough stage that you're being asked to teach, you might not be aware of all those brand new things that are going on. And so take it as a learning opportunity for yourself to be in the presence of people who are, in the mud and ankle deep and doing this stuff.
In the mud. I love it. All right. Mahanad.
That's a military thing, Will.
Yeah. In the submarine force, we try to.
I know it's not just keep the mud off the subs, right?
That's
I know.
Right.
We try to keep the mud off the planes too.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, my 2 cents, it's definitely, to answer your question, yes, it's definitely beneficial in a lot of ways. It's the status, it's the learning, like Nicholas mentioned, it's a lot of things that you can get out of it, for sure. Is it worth it from a monetary perspective? Absolutely. I mean, you've seen all kind of scenarios here, from teaching in academics, institutions, to trainings, to even consulting. I think there's a lot of angles you can get consulting, opportunities out of training for sure. So, I would definitely explore it and look at what kind of resources you have available to you to get you that kind of exposure. It's definitely rewarding is my point.
Thank you, Mahanad. All right. And a final thanks to Megan for behind the scenes getting this thing pulled together. Appreciate Megan. All right. Thank you. And we will wrap this up on time. We will, I believe, have a recording that we can send out in case you wanted to see it again, or for those who didn't get here. And unless any of you speakers object, I think we'll publish this as a podcast episode as well to make it more widely accessible. This was a great discussion. I learned a ton, and it was so fun to hear. And a bunch of people in the chat I saw were inspired to go out and, reach out to some academic officers and see if they can get a teaching gig as well. So I think we inspired some people today. Thank you to all the panelists.